This team completely dominated FNCS Major Play-ins 1. Well, not exactly. On day 1, they finished with an overall placement of 81st, which is where most teams would have just given up. But day 2 completely turned things around. They went from an average placement of 14.43 on day 1 to an average placement of 2.63 on day 2, with only one game that wasn't either a first or a second place finish. So in today's video, I'm breaking down 3 of their games, their 2 best, and the one game that held them back from a perfect day. I'm going to analyze the similarities and differences in each match, and what they could have done differently to actually achieve that perfect day. After day 2 alone, they placed 5th overall against the best players in all of EU. So let's get into game 1. Game 1 starts off super slow, with them landing at sandy strips completely uncontested. Because of that, they take full advantage of space, spending the early game just looting everything in sight and stacking as many materials, heals, and strong weapons as possible. One thing that immediately stands out is when Azatko finds a purple iron pump shotgun, but chooses to stick with his green chaos reloader instead. That's a really interesting decision, and it's not random. He clearly prefers the consistency or playstyle of that one gun over the iron pump, and it actually makes more sense later on in the match. Their entire early game is basically zero fighting, just pure setup, which is perfect for a deep run, but it does come with one big downside. They have absolutely no surge built up off spawn. By around the 8-minute mark, they rotate out toward a mountain just outside Painted Palms, which ends up being an insanely strong position. Not only are they near dead center of 4th zone, but they also have elevated height over most of the lobby. This gives them a perfect opportunity to start farming surge safely by looking back at rotating teams. Instead of being the ones pressured later, they flip the script early and start tagging players from above, slowly building up damage while staying completely in control of their positioning. For the next couple of minutes, they stay patient and disciplined, continuing to look for tags and avoiding unnecessary risks. Then the 5th zone pulls directly onto them, and now they're in one of the best spots you can ask for, height with clear vision of almost every team rotating below. At this point, they're just applying constant pressure, spraying freely with all the ammo they've stacked, and Azatko even expands into a 3rd box but leaves the entire bottom open, which is risky, but it lets him keep constant pressure on players below without blocking his own angles. It's a completely confident play, and it works because of how much control they have in that moment. As soon as 5th zone closes and 6 opens, they don't hesitate. They instantly commit to a shockwave rotation straight into the next zone. This decision is huge because if they had waited even a little longer, they would have been stuck rotating through one of the most congested areas of the map. Instead, they get ahead of it, avoid the chaos, and keep their momentum. Mid-rotate, they briefly box up to reset and immediately chain another shockwave, making sure they don't get caught or forced into a bad fight. By the time they land in zone, they've only taken 46 damage total, which is insanely efficient for that kind of rotate. Then they set up multiple boxes using metal and brick, fully stabilizing before continuing to look back for more tags on players stuck behind them. When 7th zone appears, they initially look like they want to shockwave again, but they hesitate. And that hesitation is actually really smart. They recognize how crowded their layer is, and they realize that if they go too early, they'll get focused. So instead, they wait just long enough for other teams to start moving first, blending their rotate in with that chaos instead of being the target. It's another super clean decision. Halfway through, they box up again so Frozzy can get a quick heal off. Then they use another shockwave to safely finish the rotation. During this rotation, Azatko does get heavily tagged, but he instantly responds, drops a pizza, heals up quickly, finishes a chug jug, and keeps moving. By the time the 8th zone pulls back, they switch gears. Instead of forcing forward, they stay within their builds and start looking for a refresh opportunity. This pays off big when they manage to sneak onto a player and secure a kill, giving them much needed mats and momentum. Right after, they shockwave forward again to get closer to zone, and this is where their playstyle becomes way more aggressive. They start keying players, looking for eliminations, extra materials, and anything they can use to stay alive deeper into endgame. 9th zone continues pulling back, so they stay composed. Frozzy starts tarping forward while Azatko supports, and they use another shockwave from inside their box, which gives them enough to run into zone cleanly. Now they're playing ultimate low ground, which is one of the hardest layers to survive on, but they make it work. When 10th zone pulls far, they start getting rough. Azatko picks up a kill on Atlantic Sky for a small refresh, but resources are running dangerously low. At one point, Azatko has no mats and no heals, while Frozzy is the one keeping them alive by building boxes for both of them. Despite that, they keep finding impact. Azatko picks up 2 more kills, grabbing a refresh and instantly turning into forward momentum by building and tarping them into zone. He even drops mats for Frozzy to keep the duo alive, showing how well they're playing off of each other. But in the middle of all this chaos, Frozzy goes down, and suddenly it's all on Azatko in an 11th zone clutch against 8 other players. Azatko doesn't panic. Instead, he reads the situation perfectly. He knows the team that just eliminated Frozzy has to rotate, so he pre-pieces one of them and catches them off guard for a huge elimination. That refresh gives him just enough, 44 builds and a half a chug jug, to keep going. He plays Storm for a moment, letting other players fight it out, then makes a massive play by shooting out height. As 12th zone pulls back towards him, he boxes up, stabilizes, and picks up yet another elimination. Then comes the game-winning moment. He shockwaves up to take height, turning it into a 1v2. He instantly isolates one player trying to contest him and eliminates them, leaving it as a final 1v1. From there, he recognizes the last player has no builds and neither does he, so instead of hesitating, he shockwaves straight onto him, forcing a close range fight. The opponent misses almost all of his shots, and Azotko stays composed, and just like that, he closes out that game. An 8-kill win to start the series, and honestly, that endgame was almost entirely carried by Azotko. Now, heading into their second game, this is where things get really interesting because you can start to see the patterns forming. This is where you stop watching gameplay and actually start understanding why they were so consistent throughout the entire second day of the tournament. At first glance, it might look like a completely different game, but when you really break it down, a lot of the same core decisions are still there, they're just adapting them to a different situation. They land at Sandy Strips again, but this time it's way more chaotic with two other duos contesting the POI. Instead of panicking or overcommitting to early fights, they stay disciplined. They land on the left side, secure weapon off spawn, and immediately start looting just like they did in game 1. They don't force anything. They just clear out their side of the POI as efficiently as possible, focusing on getting us stacked before making any risky plays. After that, they rotate out toward the metal buildings behind the POI, not just for materials but also for potential early damage opportunities. That's when they spot a duo who doesn't even see them, giving them free tags right away. They instantly capitalize on it, applying pressure and pitching from both sides after dealing solid damage. But even in that moment, they don't overextend. Azotko realizes he's low on mats and immediately repositions to his teammate on height, instead of forcing a fight he can't finish. They hold their position, waiting for the other team to make a move, but once the fights start dragging on with no real gain, they make a real smart call to disengage. That's something a lot of players struggle with, knowing when a fight has lost its value. For them, it's simple. It's not giving surge, loot, or positioning, so it's not worth it. Another thing worth pointing out is Azotko's loadout. It's literally the exact same as game 1. Chaos Reloader shotgun, pistol, shockwaves, and double heals. They know what works for them and they stick to it, which you guys need to apply to your gameplay as well. As they continue rotating, they hear another team at the gas station, and once again look for damage without fully committing. They coordinate a clean 3-2-1 on a rotating player, get some solid tags, but then instantly back off after getting what they need. No unnecessary risk was involved there. One of the biggest differences in this match compared to the first is how they approach Surge. Instead of ignoring it earlier, they actively look for it. They don't sit in Sandy Strips the entire time, they rotate out early, take smart fights for damage, and constantly look for opportunities to build the same Surge lead. At the same time, they're still prioritizing positioning, slowly working their way towards dead side of second zone while picking up as much mats along the way. Around the 8-minute mark, they get into another fight, but once again, both teams trade some damage and then disengage when it becomes clear the fight isn't worth continuing. You'll see that a lot in 90% of pros gameplay. That discipline shows up once again. They rotate into the third zone, and even though Azotko gets tagged pretty hard on the way, he doesn't panic. He just boxes up, heals, and keeps moving. When they reach the fourth zone, they end up in a completely dead area with no one around them, which lets them freely farm more metal and fully stabilize once again. Instead of taking the obvious height on the mountain outside Dark Dominion, like they did in game 1, they make a different call and rotate deeper into the zone, eventually boxing up on the edge of Frigid Fortress. This is a subtle but really smart adjustment. By not taking that exposed height, they avoid becoming a target for the entire lobby. If they had played that mountain, every team in zone could have looked at them. Instead, they stay low-key, reduce their pressure, and make their future rotates easier if the zone pulls away. As 5th zone opens, they instantly use a shockwave to improve their positioning. Azotko focuses on farming extra brick, while Frozzy sets up multiple boxes, creating a very strong base. They already know teams will be rotating from behind them, since that side was heavily contested earlier, so they prepare to look back and farm even more surge or find refresh for opportunities. Once again, they get another favorable zone pull, meaning they don't have to waste extra mobility, they just tarp and stay in control. With dead side now behind them, Azotko has complete freedom to look back at rotating players without worrying about getting sprayed from behind. When Storm Surge warning is up here, all the work they did earlier pays off. They're nearly 1,000 damage above the threshold, meaning Surge is no longer a concern at all. Now their only focus is clean rotations. When the next zone opens, they prep another shockwave and execute it perfectly. Even though Azotko gets hit hard during the rotate, he immediately boxes with Frozzy, heals up, and they reset without losing any control of the match. As zones continue to move, they stick to their pattern. Rotate, box, stabilize, and look for more opportunities. When the zone pulls back towards their old builds, they take advantage of that knowledge, reposition, and once again drop to ultimate low ground, which is clearly their comfort layer in endgames. Even when 9th zone pulls the opposite direction, they don't hesitate at all. They shockwave again and keep moving, staying ahead of the pressure of the back part of zone. Mid-rotate, Azotko gets heavily tagged again, but Frozzy instantly supports with a Fizzberry grenade, keeping them alive. At this point, materials are starting to run low, so they switch their focus to finding refreshes. They pick off one player, but it doesn't give them much, so they keep looking and quickly secure another elimination that gives them a full reset on mats. That's what keeps them alive, constantly recognizing when they need a refresh and actively going for those refreshes. As the zones continue pulling back, they once again start running low, and Azotko looks for another refresh while Frozzy takes control of the tarping. They spot a down player, and Azotko tries to capitalize, but takes heavy damage and has to retreat. Even then, they recover, drop back to ultimate low ground, and keep playing through the other players' builds. Eventually, they find a lucky refresh sitting in a box, which completely saves their run, and from there, they start chaining eliminations, picking up 2 more kills and stacking materials once again. Then comes another huge play. They dip into Storm and Shockwave up to height. Frozzy goes down in the process, but Azotko clutches up, gets a kill on Chino, grabs another refresh, and secures height for the final moments. He drops down slightly, takes heavy damage, but the last player ends up dying to Storm, giving them another win, this time with 6 eliminations. Looking at both games, the similarities are very clear. Same drop, same loadouts, same preferences for ultimate low ground, and most importantly, the same ability to constantly find refreshes exactly when they need them. And once again, Azotko ends up clutching as a solo in the final moments. The differences though are just as important. This time they prioritized early surge, rotated out of their POI much earlier due to being contested, and spent a large portion of their game playing from the edge instead of center zone like in game 1. But no matter what changes, one thing stays consistent. Their rotations, especially in the endgame, they are almost perfect. Their timing is what separates them from everyone else. They always move at the right moment, avoid unnecessary damage, and put themselves in positions to succeed no matter how the zone pulls. And now that we understand both the similarities and differences in these first 2 games, it sets up the real question. What went wrong in Game 3? How did they go from back-to-back wins to a 12th place finish? And what could they have done differently to avoid it? So, let's get into Game 3. This third game starts off way more chaotic than the first 2, and you can immediately feel the difference. Instead of just 2 teams contesting them on the opposite side, now there are 3 other duos landing at Sandy Strips, and one of those teams is literally landing on the exact same building as them. Right off spawn, things are way more pressured. They quickly grab whatever loot they can find from the house, but instead of trying to fight in the chaos, they make this smart decision to get out immediately, using a shockwave to rotate over to a nearby metal shack. From there, they look toward the gas station and spot another duo, getting some quick tags, but once again, they don't overcommit, especially since Azotko gets hit pretty hard. They back off, reset, and start farming materials while healing up. While they're stabilizing, another duo sneaks up on them completely unnoticed, and Azotko gets tagged again, putting them under even more pressure early on. Frozzy does a good job returning some damage to push the other team back, but once again, they choose survival over ego and disengage once again. In these first 3 games, they disengage from a total of 8 fights, continuing to rotate and farm instead of forcing anything risky. From there, they rotate up the mountain near Dark Dominion and end up finding a completely unlooted area in the center of the match, which is definitely huge for them. They fully loot it, get stacked again, and once more we see the exact same loadouts they've been running all tournament. Nothing changes there. After that, they start rotating back towards where they originally came from, eventually heading over to Sus Studios because they realize they're lacking metal. They take their time farming as much as possible and end up creating a full 6-box setup to completely max out their materials. By the time the 4th zone pulls, it lands directly on them, but they're on the most congested side of the zone, which is a big difference compared to earlier games where they had way more control. Instead of taking risks, they play it super slow, sitting in their boxes for a couple minutes, crouching, barely making any noise, just trying not to draw attention. Then, everything changes when 5th zone pulls insanely far, literally across the map to the bottom right corner. This is one of those nightmare scenarios where your entire game depends on your rotation, but just like the other matches, they stay patient. They wait for the perfect timing instead of panicking, and the moment they hear another team use a shockwave, they instantly follow it up with their own. That timing is key. It helps them blend into what most people would call chaos of endgames, instead of being singled out. They chain another shockwave and just sprint towards zone, and honestly, they get really fortunate here. Despite how far the rotation is, they manage to make it all the way into 5th zone without taking any damage, which is absolutely huge in these endgames. But once they're in, this is where their playstyle starts to shift in a way that actually kind of hurts them. Instead of looking back for tags like they did in previous games, they play extremely passive, sitting in their box and getting no damage at all. At this point, they only have around 100 surge, which is nowhere near enough for what's coming. 6th zone pulls directly on them, so the rotate is basically free. They just move slightly, build a new box, and even farm a bit more metal from a nearby structure. Frozzy adds another layer above them, and once again they fall into the same passive pattern, just sitting and waiting instead of actively looking for impact. When 7th zone appears, they finally have to move again, rotating a decent distance. They drop to low ground, then use a shockwave to get up alongside the mountain, and from there, chain another shockwave straight into the next zone, setting up new boxes once again. At this point, they're actually in a pretty solid spot. They have great materials and are even on 333 damage above the surge threshold, so surge isn't an issue anymore. But for some reason, they still start looking for refreshes instead of focusing purely on positioning and staying alive. When 8th zone pulls forward, they tarp a bit, but then surge activates again, adding more pressure. They They try to look back for beams or a refresh, but they don't find anything. Now they're stuck in a really awkward spot where they've burned time and still haven't gained anything. They open their box again and hit another shockwave, getting really close to the next zone with minimal issues. And once again, they're still alive with solid resources. But then things start falling apart. Frozzy gets split from Azotko and takes a lot of damage. They manage to reconnect and heal, but now their materials and heals are starting to run low, which means they absolutely need a refresh soon. They rotate out of Storm, back into safe zone, taking some damage in the process. And when they finally look at their resources, it's rough. Azotko only has 9 builds and Frozzy has about 20. That's basically nothing for this stage of the game. They drop down to ultimate low ground, sticking to what's been working for them. But the difference this time is they haven't been able to get consistent refreshes throughout the endgame. Frozzy gets split again, and this time he goes down, leaving Azotko to another solo clutch situation. Azotko tries to do what he's done before, rotates through Storm, shockwaves forward, and looks desperately for a refresh. But the zone pulls up a mountain, and without enough mats or heals to survive, he ends up dying to Storm. Looking at this game, there honestly aren't a ton of massive differences in how they played, but the small ones made all the impact. The biggest issue was they never found consistent refreshes during their endgame, which is something they relied heavily on in the first 2 games. The other major factor was the zone pulls. They were extremely awkward, constantly forcing them through Storm, down mountains, and then back up, which makes playing low ground way harder than usual. In a situation like that, adjusting to mid ground might have given them a better chance, especially in that final moving zone before Frozzy got eliminated. Even with that though, their overall performance is still insane. Back-to-back wins and then a 12th place and then more back-to-back wins in a lobby like that is still incredibly consistent. If you really want to improve, I'd highly recommend watching these guys yourself, Azotko and Frozzy, because there's so much you can learn just from how they move and make decisions. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and use code FLOWN in the Fortnite item shop to help support me. If you want to improve fast, check out this video on the screen. And that's going to be it for today's video. I appreciate you guys for watching and taking time out of your day to watch my video, and I will catch you guys in the next one. I love you all. Peace, guys.